Yeah, but in fairness to him, I don't think he said, that, hey, give me a title shot. He was, pretty humble, at least in the post-fight interview, as far as saying, just wherever they're ready to put me, I just want to keep going out there and keep winning.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So quit dumping on him.
I'm not dumping on him, man. It's just I just got to play with the facts, and I'm not a
Well,
prisoner
the
of the
more
moment.
the more you talk shit, the better he's going to do now.
I know. I'm giving him the touch of grace, which we're going to talk about in a minute, because Dominic Cruz, everyone's favorite guy, pulled through and won. I love Dominic Cruz. His style is impetuous.
Yes,
I don't know how
fans,
anyone is ever going to touch him. It's
the
incredible.
fans loved him too.
Yeah. Yes. So, what was your card on this fight? Because I think a lot of people were upset by 50-45, and it was kind of an interesting fight because even though I didn't have it 50-45, each round was close. But just because each round was close doesn't necessarily mean that the final card has to be close. So how did you score?
Exactly. It's like the Electoral College if you're a politics nerd. I mean, it's an all-or-nothing principle. So, even if you're really close in the popular vote, you could still get your butt kicked in. I could see an argument for saying Cruz even won all 5 rounds. I personally, I think I would have had it maybe 4-1 for Cruz, or maybe 3-1 with one of those rounds being a draw. I can't honestly go back and remember which one was which, but what we saw really was just Cruz had the better work rate. He was landing with a lot more strikes, and Faber did drop him a couple times, and they were definitely more meaningful shots than a lot of what Cruz landed, but I don't think he was ever close to really seriously finishing Cruz either. So it was definitely not the easiest fight to judge as far as, there were a couple of close rounds in there, like you said.
Yeah, I initially had the fight even. I can't do the math in my head right now. What would it be?
2-2-1?
2-2 with one even is what I had, yes. Yeah. I had the first for Faber, the second 2 for Cruz, the fourth for Faber, and then the last one even. I was watching it at a party, beers were flowing. I went back and watched it, and I had the first round even, 2 for Cruz, 1 for Faber, and then the last one for Cruz. So I actually do have Cruz winning. I think watching it, I was entirely enamored with Faber's takedown defense in the last round. However, he didn't have any offense. He just had defense, and it was Cruz who was coming forward and pushing. And I think he did enough to pull it out that round.
Yeah.
Before we get into the career path stuff, why do you think Cruz was so effective in this fight versus do you think it was the same stuff that led him to victories over Scott Jorgensen and Joseph Benavidez, or do you think it was like a different game plan?
I think it was the exact same game plan, and that was what I was thinking would be the difference if he didn't get mentally caught up in Faber already having a win over him and just did what he's capable of doing and focused on what his game plan was. I thought he'd be okay, and in the end, except for maybe a scare or two, that's kind of how it played out. And we talked about the Benavidez fight, and I think that's actually been Cruz's toughest fight in a while. Benavidez, while he's not the most perfect polished fighter ever, I think his boxing is actually a tiny bit better than Faber's. Faber has maybe a little bit better wrestling than Benavidez, but it's not as good as Jorgensen's. So Faber didn't present anything new that Cruz hadn't seen. The only thing he had a little bit of was a little more power, and so we saw that in his hand a couple times. But like I said, didn't have a good enough offensive wrestling, and didn't have enough reach or height to really bother Cruz all that much. So Cruz really was able to dictate the pace, and also footwork is a huge part of it. While I don't expect anyone to come out dancing like Dominic does, you still need some way to close the distance or close off the cage or do something, and Faber never really had an answer for that.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm going to say that the biggest problem Faber had, and the biggest... Someone is calling me. Oh, man. Sorry. The biggest problem that Faber has in his career is he has no way to close the distance between himself and his opponent. Right. If you watch the fights, this gets him into trouble in the Brown fight. It gets him into trouble in the Aldo fight. And it's also something that Roger Huerta has the same problem. They do well when they're in striking distance, but in order to get there, they kind of just leap at their opponents, like they jump.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really got him into trouble because when he moved straight at Cruz was able to angle off and score.
Right.
And I think that that's something he has to work on. His striking looked a lot better in this fight than it did in others, but I still think that he needs to work on that. And I think that Master Tong, is the kind of guy who can teach him that. I just don't know if he's going to be able to pick it up. Also,
yeah,
when Faber had a full body lock on Cruz less than a minute into the fight and couldn't get the takedown, that had to be extremely disheartening, because if he had been able to get on top and punish Cruz, that would have made the fight look entirely different.
Yeah, and it almost goes back to something you brought up. I remember about Faber a long time ago. I think it might have even been before this fight. It might have even been before the Eddie Wineland. You were mentioning that Faber, great athlete and a solid wrestler, but he's not the best wrestler in that Team Alpha Male camp. I mean, that definitely was Chad Mendez, but he's not the best wrestler in that weight class, or really. Like you said, as far as closing the distance, I mean, I don't think he has that great of a double leg, and being short probably doesn't help matters. And, as far as striking goes, you mentioned, he's so fast and quick, he can leap in and land a really hard shot and get out against, some of the lower level guys, but against Cruz, it just doesn't work that well. And, you need to be able to kind of move halfway in a distance, bait the guy in, move back out and counter. And like I said, just really find a way to dictate the pace and force them to react to what you're doing, and he can't do that against a guy like Cruz, who can just move like a spaz the entire time for 25 minutes. And actually, something I want to talk about also, I was surprised. Cruz looked like he was breathing pretty heavy in the first round, and I was wondering if we were going to see a repeat of like the Aldo Hominick fight, but Cruz just keeps going. I don't know how he doesn't run out of energy.
Yeah, it's weird because he moves a lot, but he seems to have sort of, I don't mean to contradict myself, but he seems to have an economy of motion, maybe not an economy of motion, more like an economy of offense, where even though he seems to be constantly moving, he doesn't throw very much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's a lot easier to move around and dip and dive and, get out of the way of wrenches than it is to actually throw a lot. And I think that that's part of the reason why his cardio is able to last him through these long 5-round fights.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, let's talk about the personalities involved, because a lot of people thought that if Faber were to lose, he would have to almost take on a Rich Franklin role where he just took big fights, but he was out of title contention. And a lot of people think that maybe Cruz doesn't have the personality and the persona that Faber does to carry a smaller division. What was your first impression after we got the results and knew that Cruz was going to be the champion moving forward and Faber was taking another loss?
Mm-hmm. Well, who knows? I mean, we've seen champions that people haven't been incredibly fond of. As long as they're getting the job done and the results are there, then given the sporting aspect of it, I think it'll work out all right. Cruz might not be a guy that'll carry another pay-per-view by himself. Certainly, I think we'll see him more in a number 2 slot kind of role. I think that's going to be the big thing, because if people don't like a guy, if you can kind of run with that a little bit, and, Michael Bisping is going to make a career off people hating him, so. You don't have to be the most likable dude in the world, but Faber, like I said, it is a little more of a conundrum until the UFC finally gets the damn flyweight division going. I mean, he can't fight Benavidez. He fought Wineland, but do you want a guy? They don't ever want to end up in that position where you have a guy knocking off contenders but can't beat your champion, because that really it limits the amount of options you have for creating interesting matchups and getting guys in the title picture.
Yeah, and I think something that actually interestingly came out of this was, even though Faber didn't do enough to win, I personally think he did enough not to warrant an immediate rematch, but I think if he went back and beat some contenders, I don't think they would have a problem selling a third fight, because he had the knockdowns, he won a round or 2, depending on whose card, and he never really looked out of the fight the way someone like Scott Jorgensen did.
Yeah. And that's true. I guess as far as immediate rematches go, the best option might be, I don't know, what do you think of a fight with Brian Bowles?
Yeah, I think Bowles would be good. Jorgensen would be good. He already beat Mizugaki.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they have to have someone challenge for the belt. So I think whoever.
As we know, Cruz beat Bowles, but.
Oh, you mean for Cruz?
It was the hand injury, so.
So you mean for Cruz?
Yeah, I mean, let's say if Brian Bowles gets by Faber, then. I think there'd be enough interest in that rematch since, probably most UFC fans didn't see it.
That's true, too. And I mean, are you shocked at all about the success? Well, I guess we're going to see with the pay-per-view numbers, but it seems like there hasn't really been any drop-off from fan interest with these lower weight fighters.
No, and I hope not, and I'm glad, because I've said for years that, the higher up in weight you go, the less and less amount of talent you see. So if people can appreciate the lighter weight guys and, just how good they are and how well-rounded they are, then I think that makes for a better sport in general. And, certainly that pay-per-view from top to bottom was a pretty exciting card. So, even though I don't think there were any heavyweight fights, and, there was one 205 matchup in the middleweight. I mean, yeah, it was mostly lighter weights, and I think it was still really exciting, really action-packed. So, it's certainly a good advertisement for why you don't have to have a heavyweight fight on the card for people to give a crap.
Are you calling Neil Wayne untalented?
I'm afraid I am, yes, sir.
What about Dennis Stoynick?
Dennis Stoynick, he does have nice man tits.
I think that is a talent. I mean, if hot dog eating is a sport, I think having man tits is a talent.
It is. I mean, as I've always said about I know how much he probably works out, so the fact that he can keep that gut, I mean, he has to put, if he can keep that gut, that takes some talent. That doesn't happen all by itself.
All right, well, last couple of things before we close it up. Tell the truth, when Ortiz won, you jumped out and started doing the gravedigger.
I did not, but I lost $20, and the guy that won the $20 from me was inebriated and threw a piece of furniture over and did a gorilla dance or something. He was pretty happy.
I have to put Pro MMA Now editor and general czar on blast. I guess it was in the play-by-play, maybe it was on Facebook. When he won, Jack Bratcher put up, Tito Ortiz just won. How can you not like this guy? And I was thinking, I have several reasons, actually.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite funny.
Usually his fights can be boring. He's been beaten time and time again by non-Ken Shamrock fighters.
He makes terrible excuses when he loses. He was accused of beating up his girlfriend. I mean, there's a lot of things you could not like about him.
Yeah, true. But I do enjoy his social awkwardness and trying to commentate and just stumbling over himself. So I guess I shouldn't make fun of him too much for that, given what I do.
Yeah, I think that, the Affliction card, the first one, the audio from it should be, put on a gold record and sent into space. So that if aliens ever come, they know that, Tito Ortiz being Babalu, Lalaloo, and they'll think we're unintelligent and not come in and kill us all.
Yeah, it was it needs to be in a time capsule somewhere. There's a good YouTube video, though, of some of his great skits from that show.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us. MMA Outsider Podcast signing off. We're going to be back in regular. Computer issues are now fixed. So, for John Buhl, I'm Richard Anderson Mann saying talk to you later.